Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sally Burdett.
And I'm Louisa Pilbeam. Our top stories. US travel disruption on one of the busiest days of the year. Passengers face delays after American Airlines grounded all flights on Christmas Eve.
France's new Prime Minister names his cabinet, tasked with ending the country's political deadlock and debt crisis.
Waiting for Trump's tariffs, Chinese manufacturers prepare for new US import charges and say prices are likely to rise.
And how China is ploughing ahead with its growing winter sports business.
American Airlines says it's working to resume all flights after its planes were grounded due to a technical fault.
Now, passengers have faced delays of several hours at airports across the country. The problems began at the start of Christmas Eve, one of the busiest travel days of the year. Our correspondent John Torres joins us from New York. Hello, John. Well, it started the festive season. Pretty awful timing for American Airlines. It's all over now, but I imagine a huge knock-on impact. And do we really know what went wrong?
Well, you raised so many questions there, you know, Sal. I could sum this entire story up by doing a quick impression. Are you ready? There we are. Now you know everything that you need to know about this. There's nothing else that people around the world need to know. Look, this is very bad news indeed, and I will tell you why. It reminds me of the fabulous film, one of my favorites, Planes, Trains and Automobiles, starring Steve Martin and John Candy. Now, that film is about Thanksgiving, which was 4 or 5 weeks ago, but this is obviously Christmas Eve. I mean, what a day for this to happen. The last time something like this happened here, it was Southwest Airlines back in the spring and summer of 2023, and that cost them. The chairman had to go, and 6 board members had to go, and they were hauled before Congress to find out what went wrong. And that was Southwest over a year ago. Look, American Airlines, one of the 3 big international carriers we have here, based in Dallas-Fort Worth in Texas, they completely froze all their flights for about an hour, several hours ago. Now, the problem is 80% of all American flights come out of Dallas-Fort Worth, and many, many, many of them go into Dallas before going on to another location. Now, American is blaming technical issues. Now, come on, American, you've got to do better than this, okay, because we know what happened, and you're not telling us. They say it was vendor technology. What does that mean? You know, somebody in the publicity department is basically at home in their pajamas writing that. But we know what happened because the captains are telling people in the back of the aircraft what happened, and they're then telling everybody on social media. So unless all the passengers are wrong, it looks like there was a problem with one of the computer systems, which can't release the aircraft from the gate unless it's been green lit or there's a tick there, so that the computer knows that the aircraft is perfectly in balance. You know, when you put everybody on and then you put all the baggage inside, there is an optimum point of central gravity, which the computer needs to know has been fulfilled. And that's the bit that we understand has failed. Now, I could be wrong about that because I'm getting that from social media, but, you know, thousands of people probably can't be wrong. It is a serious smutsnala. It is also true, it lasted 1 hour. It is also true that flights are now getting away, but as your United States correspondent, I have enormous experience of this. When something like this happens early in the morning, there is a huge knock-on effect right the way through the day. Plus, we have bad weather in America. It's just finished snowing in New York, okay? There are storms over on the West Coast as well. I promise you, there are people who are not going to be getting home for Christmas, or they're going to be getting home very, very late at night, and they're going to be very tired on Christmas Day. It's a terrible thing to have happened if you're trying to travel, and it's a good life lesson. Try and travel a few days before, because this, you know, the weather problem is the big issue we have here. Anyway, American shares were down 4%. They're now down about 1/5%. Just be glad, Sal. Just thank the Lord that you're not in America traveling this close to Christmas Day, because it's going to be a nightmare.
I can imagine the frustration. Now, John, Joe Biden is into the last month of his presidency, but he's still quite busy. He's just signed this defense bill into law, pretty wide-ranging, apparently.
I know this is the second day in a row that we've had to deal with this issue on our program. We did a very similar story yesterday, which I'll tell you about in a second. But he's just gone ahead and signed a new defense bill. And there are all sorts of various aspects to that bill. It pumps another $895 million into the U.S. military. Among other things, it increases the pay for junior personnel. But crucially, from our point of view, it also includes money to counter China's military prowess around the world. And to be more specific about this, it actually sets up potentially confrontation between U.S. military forces and military forces in China. And to be even more specific about it, we're talking about Taiwan. The money is there to move U.S. military forces into or around Taiwan should the President of the United States deem that to be necessary. So it's potentially escalating the ongoing stress and tension that there is between Beijing and Washington just at the time that governments here are changing. Now, there's a model for this. There's something very similar within the system here for dealing with Ukraine, where they can move money around very quickly if they wish to, and military resources if they feel they need to, which, of course, in Ukraine's case, as far as American forces are concerned, they haven't yet and now probably won't. China has been responding to this. It says, look, the U.S. has to abandon its Cold War mentality. And it comes just 24 hours after yesterday on the program I was telling you about the U.S. trade representative signed off by President Biden, who is now going after China's legacy chips. These are not the AI ones, but this is things they've been making for years in autos, cars, that sort of thing, washing machines, all that kind of stuff. And the trade representative is concerned that China is about to dominate, or is already dominating that, and flooding the market with their own legacy chips. So that's yesterday's story and today's story. And the reason I go through all this with you is so much depends on President Trump. You know, we just don't know. We have to wait and see what he actually does. You know, he's very good at that. You know that. But what will he actually do? How bad will these tariffs against China and other countries actually turn out to be? And we're just going to have to wait, see what he does. Tariffs, taxes, or deregulation, nobody really knows. The one thing I think you can bet on, unfortunately, is that I think relations between Beijing and Washington are poised to get even worse than they have been in recent years. But nobody knows. We'll have to wait and see. Let me just tell you, will there be a Santa Claus rally? Yes, they will. The Dow's up 0.5%. There you go.
Well, thanks very much, John Terrett in New York, and happy holidays to you.
China has announced plans to raise its budget deficit to GDP ratio and issue larger government bonds.
Now, this as a meeting of the National Financial Work Conference wound up in Beijing. It's reported the budget deficit could increase to 4% of GDP next year, with the economic growth target remaining at 5%. The group emphasised the need for a more proactive fiscal policy in 2025, aimed at boosting domestic demand and improving social welfare.
Well, Chinese lawmakers are reviewing a draft of a new bill to regulate and promote the development of the private sector. It's aimed at instilling more confidence among entrepreneurs. Our reporter Feng Yilei has more.
The draft addresses key issues such as fair competition, investment and financing reforms, as well as intellectual property protection.
We hope that the law will provide more private enterprises with a better business environment and greater opportunities for development. I think this draft has provided a directional initiative, but when it comes to implementing specific measures, we hope to see more detailed and comprehensive plans, such as for private enterprises to achieve truly fair competition with the state-owned enterprises and participate fairly in the international market environment.
Lawmakers have also addressed key issues such as curbing excessive administrative interference and establishing mechanisms for timely payments to private businesses.
I fully support the introduction of this bill to support the private enterprise. We all understand that private enterprise and business are very, very important to every economy. The introduction of this bill is to, deliver a very clear message and signal to all stakeholders, including to foreign enterprise. We have a measure and we have mechanism in place to facilitate investment from foreign enterprise, make sure that they are treated equally, and also their right and, things will be protected under this law.
As of September 2024, over 55 million private enterprises have been registered nationwide. Official data suggests private enterprises account for over 92% of the nation's businesses last year. The draft law comes at a critical time as private enterprises are spearheading innovation in emerging sectors. Experts say the draft law is of great and far-reaching significance for further optimizing the development of private economy, while also accelerating and promoting high-quality development. Peng Yilei, CGTN, Beijing.
France's new Prime Minister, François Bayrou, has announced his cabinet. It's France's fourth government in less than a year. The new ministers will have to tackle a long-running political crisis, the 2025 budget, and spiralling national debt.
Bayrou's new team includes two former prime ministers and several other political heavyweights from mainly centrist backgrounds. France has been in political turmoil since President Macron called a parliamentary vote in the summer after his party lost to the far right in EU elections. Well, I'm pleased to say that Anne-Elisabeth Moutet is a French journalist and commentator who joins us now. Anne-Elisabeth, France's fourth government this year then, and bitter political conflict throughout Parliament. What chance does this government have under Bayrou?
I would not be too optimistic, except that there might be a kind of political exhaustion. But, and people have seen so many changes, and each time was more stressful than the previous one. But at the same time, you have members of a coalition, or at least an array of representatives of this party, which is a little bit wider than Michel Barnier, because it's got several former members of the Socialist Party, none current members of the Socialist Party, so that the idea was to have people from the center, from the Republican right, les Républicains, and to have people from the sort of moderate left, which means the Socialist Party, but not the alliance that won about 1/3 of the seats and which is led by La France Insoumise, the hard left party of Jean-Luc Mélenchon. This is a lot of strange names, but what it means is that the hard left have immediately said that this government would face a vote of no confidence the minute they try to pass a law, which is really a problem because the budget is still not through, and because the left demands, together with the hard right of Marine Le Pen, the reform or a change of the law of making French pensions slightly less generous than they were before. And that means that after the holidays, anything goes. And it's really going to be up to François Bayrou, a man who's 73 years old, who started in politics in the 70s, and who has less charisma and certainly less foreign experience, international experience, than Michel Barnier, the former European Commissioner and Brexit negotiator. So I'm not optimistic for this government.
Okay, and you mentioned some of those interesting appointments there, but would you say that perhaps President Macron himself faces some problems from public sentiment?
President Macron is deeply unpopular. He doesn't want to cope with it. He's very unhappy about it. He takes it very personally, and unfortunately, some of it is directed personally. He has been seen for 7 years. He was elected in 1922. It's going to be, next year is going to be 8th anniversary of the time he got to power. He was re-elected once. He can't run again, and he has been a lame duck president with ever worse returns. I would say since the 2018 yellow vest crisis, there's a feeling of remoteness, there's a feeling of contempt for the general public. There's a sort of lecturing style that does not work, but he doesn't change it. And we saw this only recently in the hurricane-hit island of Mayotte in the Indian Ocean, when Macron went there to be with the people who had lost their homes, had lost members of the families, and he was filmed lecturing people because they disagreed with him. It's not a good look, and I think essentially he does not want to resign yet. He cannot call another snap election like he did last year because there has to be an interval of 1 year between two snap elections called by the president, and therefore he's stuck. He's between a rock and a hard place on this one.
Yeah, definitely. So he also has to deal with the budget in 2025 as well. Anne-Elisabeth Muté, we would love to talk about this more. That we're out of time, but French journalist and commentator, thank you very much for your time.
Now, businesses across the United Kingdom are preparing for new taxes that will kick in from April next year. It's causing concern across multiple sectors, including the hospitality industry.
Yeah, this includes many pubs, which are an integral part of British culture, and they're now facing rising costs and economic uncertainty. Our correspondent Li Jinhua has more.
Pub culture has long been at the heart of British life. But now, many are bracing for a challenging winter after October's budget, the first by the Labour government, which took office in July. This pub in West London, still repaying COVID-era loans, may face an additional $3,000 in monthly costs due to rises in contributions to each employee's social security tax, known in the UK as NI or National Insurance. The owner says customers were already pulling back on spending well before the tax hikes.
It's already impacted on businesses like ours and hospitality across the UK. Quite what happens going forward is difficult to discern or understand, given the thresholds on the NI rising.
And do you think it's going to impact your plan for hiring more people in the future?
We'd like to hire 2 people, but it's probably more financially sensible for us to hire in as and when we need, and that company can deal with the NIC.
Recent research from the Nighttime Industries Association shows the hospitality sector supports over 2 million jobs in the UK. 90% of businesses surveyed report financial struggles. And it is not just pubs. Many companies are bracing for the budget's impact.
Starting in April, the rate employers pay in national insurance contributions will rise by about 1.2%. In the meantime, the threshold at which employers will start paying it has been lowered, which means businesses must start their national insurance contributions from about $6,300 of an employee's earnings.
The government is providing financial support for businesses through a scheme called the Employers' Allowance, but many worry this will not be enough. The UK's finance minister says the increases are necessary to fill a $50 billion black hole in public finances.
If you take the measures that I set out in the budget in the round, it's good for jobs and it's good for growth.
Experts say despite the tax rises, the UK remains competitive compared to other European countries for now.
If we were to compare this with other countries, particularly in Europe, such as France and Belgium and Italy, the social security costs, or the NIC costs as we call them here, those are comparatively lower here. But if this continues and there's extra taxes on employers, then those advantages diminish and fall away.
Richard Reeves promised not to raise the taxes again.
I think, again, has to be taken with a pinch of salt. I mean, I don't know how someone so early on in the Parliament can actually make those pledges.
As pubs and small businesses navigate these rising costs, many are uncertain if they will survive to see the rosier times the government is aiming for. Li Jinhua, CGTN, London.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Europe's biggest economy now has an ultra-low birth rate. But what does it mean for Germany and the wider EU?
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans, grey rhinos, and unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
what unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, work continues on a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, with both sides indicating a deal is close. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says there's been some progress, but he has told lawmakers he doesn't know how long it will take to complete negotiations.
Yeah, indirect talks have been underway in Doha, brokered by Egypt, Qatar and the US. Israel believes around 62 hostages are still alive in Gaza.
CGTN's Jonathan Regev has the latest from Tel Aviv.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a session of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, last night, saying that progress has been made and a deal is closer, but there's still some time to go. He cannot elaborate on that, and as you mentioned, he does not know how long will it take. It sounds optimistic, but it also sounds familiar, as these are pretty much the same things we've heard last May and last July. Negotiations, the deal is closed, and then eventually there were problems along the way, maybe raised by Israel. There was no deal. Will it be different now? Perhaps. We do not know. What the families are saying, they're hoping, is that perhaps Donald Trump has more leverage on Israel, on Benjamin Netanyahu, than Joe Biden. We know that both are presidents, both Biden and Trump, are interested in the deal. Biden is interested in a deal that would be perhaps the last remark of his presidency, leaving a legacy of a deal which will bring some of the hostages back. And Donald Trump wants to come in with a clean table as much as possible from world conflicts. Therefore, both presidents, and especially Trump, which has perhaps more leverage on Netanyahu, are interested in this deal. Does that mean that a deal will eventually happen? Absolutely not. We do not know that. We know that there is opposition from within the Israeli coalition, once again coming from far-right lawmakers, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir. Both of them raised their opposition to previous deals, and they're doing the same now. If you ask many Israeli analysts, they will say that when Benjamin Netanyahu has to decide between the good of his coalition and the good of anything else, he will choose his coalition. What will it be this time? We'll have to wait and see.
Meanwhile, there has been confirmation that Israel assassinated the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh back in July. What is the significance of Israel confirming this?
The message was especially sent to the leaders of the Houthis. It was Israel Katz, the defense minister, who for the first time actually claimed responsibility for that act in Tehran at the end of July. The comments by Israel Katz were just like Israel reached Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, then it will do the same. It is capable of doing the same with the Houthi leaders in Yemen. The main message is actually not to the Iranians, but to the leaders of the Houthis in Yemen, also to the Iranians, which are perhaps those backing the Houthis, but especially the message coming to the leaders of the Houthis. How much were they impressed? Just hours after that message from Israel Katz, another missile was sent from Yemen. Another siren sounded here in central Israel in the very early hours of the morning, sending millions of Israelis to the shelters. But the significance, as you asked, is mostly sending the message to the Houthis. I think it was widely understood, even back then, without any Israeli claim, that Israel is the one behind that attack. And when Iran fired more than 100 missiles towards Israel in early October, they said that it was in retaliation for many actions, among them the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. Of course, a lot has changed in the Middle East since then, but the main message is, of course, to the leaders of the Houthis in Yemen. If Israel reached a Hamas leader in Tehran, it is capable of reaching you. This, according to Defense Minister Israel Katz.
5 men have been given sentences of up to 6 months following violence in Amsterdam last month during a football match between Ajax and Maccabi Tel Aviv.
They're the first people to be convicted over the unrest. At the time, it was described by city officials as a toxic cocktail of hooliganism, anti-Semitism and anger. Prosecutors said the violence was influenced by the situation in Gaza, but not motivated by anti-Semitism.
In Gaza, the Israeli army is reported to have attacked 2 hospitals, injuring dozens of people. Patients are also being forcibly evacuated from a 3rd hospital, according to Gaza's health ministry.
CGTN's Rami Amagari has the latest.
20 people have been reportedly injured at the Kamal Adwan hospital when the Israeli army, as reported, when the Israeli army hit the hospital, around the hospital, with some robot explosives. That's what has been reported, forcing the dwellers or those inside the hospital to leave immediately. And also the Al-Auda hospital in the northern Gaza Strip, in the Jabalia refugee camp, has been forced to leave the hospital. The Indonesian hospital, notably, has already evacuated. That's what has been reported, which is close to the Auda hospital in northern Gaza Strip. So the hospitals over there are defunctioning almost completely because of the intensity of the Israeli actions, and it seems the Israeli army does not want to see hospitals or population over there, as there have been reports about detonation and explosion of homes, destruction of more homes in the northern Jabalia refugee camp, and pictures from Jabalia show that most of the homes have been flattened and pounded to the ground over there. This is for the northern Gaza Strip. For the Gaza City, there was a strike in a home in which 4 people were killed in east of Gaza City. Another strike hit also some parts of the eastern Gaza City, in which 1 people was killed and 2 others injured, including a woman and a child. In the central Gaza Strip, actually, there was a strike on those guarding the shipments coming in the territory for the past few days. Yesterday night, there was an action against those guards by the Israeli army. 5 people were killed, and the day before, also 5 people were killed. And always Israel claims that these people are belonging to the Hamas, which Israel does not want to see after the war, as stated by the Israeli Prime Minister when he said recently that the war will continue until Hamas is removed totally and completely. That's the situation for now, and according to the UNICEF, notably 14,500 Palestinian children have been killed since the eruption of the Israeli war against the Islamist Hamas party back in October 7 of 2023.
Syria's de facto leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa, has agreed with former rebel factions to dissolve all groups and merge them under the defense ministry. Key opposition figure Murhaf Abu Kasra has been appointed defense minister for the interim government. Kasra led the insurgency that toppled the former president, Bashar al-Assad. The agreement comes after protests in Syria over the burning of a public Christmas tree in a Christian-majority town. Minority religious groups are calling for the new administration to do more to protect them. The HTS rebel group says foreign fighters have been detained over the Christmas tree incident.
12 people have been killed in an explosion at a weapons factory in Turkey. 4 others were wounded and a number of buildings destroyed in the western city of Balıkesir. Eyewitnesses report seeing a fireball and thick smoke at the site. Authorities say they have ruled out sabotage. A Russian cargo ship has sunk in the Mediterranean, according to the country's foreign ministry. The Ursa Major was sailing off the coast of Spain when an explosion occurred in the engine room. 14 crew have been rescued, but 2 are reported missing. Russian media say it was transporting reactor hatches for a nuclear-powered ice-breaking ship. Famine is spreading in Sudan, with acute food shortages now reported in 5 areas, including at 2 refugee camps. Over 24 million people, around half the country's population, is said to be affected in some way. Aid agencies say starvation could spread to more regions in Sudan in the coming months. They've accused the country's warring factions of disrupting aid supplies for political purposes.
Now to this story, Germany has joined the group of EU nations with an officially ultra-low fertility rate. Figures show the average German woman is having just over 1.3 children in her lifetime. That is below the EU's ultra-low threshold of 1.4. Estonia and Austria have also joined a number of European countries with among the lowest birth rates in the world. Now, some experts say governments must do more to promote family-friendly policies to boost the population. Let's get more on this now with demographer and broadcaster Dr. Paul Morland, also author of the book Tomorrow's People. Paul, thanks so much for joining us. Why does Germany have this ultra-low birth rate?
Germany is really not unusual for countries in Europe and East Asia, which have hit modernity, which we can essentially define as high levels of urbanization, high levels of income, and at the same time see their fertility rates, the number of children per woman, go low and then very, very low. As people enter this kind of modern life, unless they have an ideology, a belief, a religion that informs them that having children is the most important thing and they prioritize it, then whether it's Japan or China or Macedonia or Britain or Germany, the fertility rate goes low. Now, in Germany, one of the problems is not just that it's very low now, but it's been below most of the rest of the developed world for a long time. And that means that there are very few young people coming through to the workforce. So you've got to think about what is it now? What are we building up problematically for the future, which is ultra low? And how low has it been for the last couple of generations, which means you've got lots and lots of old people, not enough young people coming into the workforce, too many people requiring pensions and healthcare, and not enough people paying tax.
So if it's at the bottom line, obviously there are lots of different reasons, but if finances and economics is at the heart of it, surely the best way is for government to offer an incentive for people having a second and third child. Does that work?
Well, first of all, the paradox is that as countries get richer, their fertility rates go down, generally. And then once they're low, the question is about their values rather than material wealth. Now, I think governments can do an awful lot. Governments can give child benefits. Governments can encourage women to combine education and working with childbearing by giving them rights in the workplace. There are a whole range of policies that governments can offer. But if that's not combined with a pronatal culture, if people have values and priorities that don't rate having children highly, then there's actually not much the government can do. It is important, however, that the government signals its intentions, because that is a good start. Whether those policies are effective or not, it's at least a good start if the government says this matters to us. That's how you start to change the culture.
How could this impact future migration patterns? We know that some countries in Africa, for example, still have high birth rates and they're living longer. So potentially there's a lot of people in Africa who could come to Europe to look after an aging population. Is that starting to happen?
Well, it started to happen a long time ago. In countries like Germany, Britain, France, we historically had a lot of immigration from other parts of Europe. In Britain, for example, from Ireland and Poland. Germany had a lot of immigration from Italy in the 50s and also from Turkey. But these are all countries which now have much lower fertility rates themselves. The living standard gap has closed. And so more and more countries who can afford to attract immigrants are having to attract them from fewer and fewer countries that still have a high fertility rate. The trouble is that those countries with high fertility rates are increasingly poor. They're increasingly countries where there's very little very low levels of education and human development. And so what we're seeing in Europe, across Europe, it's not just Germany, is where there is mass immigration, it's from countries with very low levels of economic productivity. And so it's not necessarily, it might be plugging some of the gaps in the workforce, but it's not actually helping the economy as a whole.
Well, thank you very much for your analysis. That is Dr. Paul Morland, author of the book Tomorrow's People.
But you can get highlights from the week's news in Europe and China direct to your inbox from CGTN's Storyboard email newsletter. Sign up at europe.cgtn.com/newsletter.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, there's no business like snow business. China cashes in on the winter economy.
do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story, wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Sally Bedett and Louisa Pilbeam. The headlines again. US travel disruption on one of the busiest days of the year. Passengers face delays after American Airlines grounded all flights on Christmas Eve. And France's new Prime Minister names his cabinet tasked with ending the country's political deadlock and debt crisis. Now, we're less than a month away from Donald Trump's inauguration. Governments, manufacturers and retailers across the world are waiting to see how far the US president-elect will go in his threat to impose tariffs on US imports. Now, one city facing uncertainty is Yiwu in eastern China. Now, it's known for making all sorts of small items, such as toys and household goods. Li Jiaming reports.
The Christmas vibe is in full swing in eastern China's Yiwu city. It is known as China's capital of small commodities. Data show that 8 out of 10 Santa Claus models worldwide are from here. Behind this commercial dominance is price, product, and purchasing ease.
The products here are designed by us. We have competitive price and products. Our goods are sold to over a dozen countries.
Shops here, albeit small, sell products to dozens of countries. Due to the nature of the business, small gadgets here are sensitive to the changes of international economic landscape, such as the rise of tariffs and the fluctuation in exchange rate.
We don't really have the concern. Since our production line is here, we do not plan to relocate. Instead, we aim to improve our products, making those more likable.
Besides manufacturers, the supply chain has also started preparing to cope with the possible tariff changes.
This is Yiwu Port, the central transit hub for small items. From ribbons to nails, Christmas accessories to light bulbs, small items from here are being shipped to everywhere.
Jin Shufeng owns a global logistic company. He says, business people will always find a way to do business, no matter how the climate changes.
We're also diversifying our market, seeking new opportunities in emerging markets such as Central Asia.
Business people in Yiwu tell CGTN that they've seen worse, but experience has shown that as long as the demand is there, trade goes on. Li Jiaming, CGTN, Yiwu.
Shares in Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company have touched a record high as the firm eyes its best annual stock performance in decades. The world's largest chip maker was up more than 1% on the Taipei market on Tuesday. Its stock has risen 82% this year, driven by investor confidence over the growth in artificial intelligence. The world's largest EV battery maker has unveiled a new electric car chassis, which it says can withstand frontal impact at speeds of up to 120 kilometers an hour. China's CATL says its new Bedrock chassis is aimed at premium car makers who want to accelerate the production of new models and focus on safety. The company hasn't said when the chassis will be commercially available. The UK is consulting with the motor industry over plans to phase out new petrol and diesel cars by 2030. The government says talks with automakers are part of a wider push to make electric cars cheaper and easier to charge. Car manufacturers have previously said consumers need more incentive to buy electric if the end-of-decade target is to be met.
China is looking to capitalise on a boom in its winter sports and entertainment industry. With more than 300 million people enjoying seasonal activities each year, the sector is expected to bring in $168 billion by 2027. CGTN's Zheng Songwu reports from China's Harbin City, one of the largest ice and snow theme parks in the world.
China has huge potential for winter tourism. Experts say by the end of next year, the total volume of winter tourism will reach 1 trillion yuan. China's central government has also set goals like by 2027, the total volume of winter tourism should reach 1.2 trillion yuan, and by 2030, increase to 1.5 trillion yuan, which is about 200 billion US dollars. The central government has introduced 24 measures to boost winter tourism. For example, China will promote the development of the whole industrial chain of ice and snow sports, culture, equipment and tourism, sports venues and supporting services, winter sports and economic education in colleges and vocational schools will be enhanced. Financial support systems have also been introduced around the country. In Changchun City in Jilin Province, officials offered local enterprises subsidies to hold tourism activities. Xinjiang officials also provided companies decent loans to develop the industry. Hosting big-ticket events is another way to boom the winter tourism. And the Winter Games next year has also made Harbin or even the entire northeast China even more popular this winter. And the amount of visitors to Harbin City, 80% of them are from southern China. Cities like Hangzhou, Chengdu, Changsha, Sanya, etc. Aside from Harbin City, the cities in like Mohe in Heilongjiang and Yanbian and Changchun in Jilin provinces and Shenyang and Dalian in Liaoning province are also popular this winter for the tourists.
Let's now hear from Justin Downs, president of Axis Leisure Management.
Certainly the Harbin Ice Festival has become a global phenomenon. It always used to attract millions and millions of visitors, including a lot from overseas. And so there's still many millions of people in China, or tens of millions of people in China that have yet to experience it. So what it does is exposes people to the winter environment. Then it triggers their interest in getting involved in the winter sport that comes a result of that. So people go to Harbin, they experience the snow and the ice, and then they say, hey, Mom and Dad, I want to go skiing or ice skating or snowboarding. And it's a really important part of the whole ecosystem.
Talk to me about winter sports and which ones are gaining popularity in China.
Well, certainly skiing and snowboarding are the most user-friendly, easy for the mainstream population to pick up. It's not a specialist sport per se. It's not limited by time or space. So skiing and snowboarding is enjoying extreme popularity right across the country, from the northern ski resorts in outdoor ski destinations to the south in indoor ski domes. The pickup both from the youth and from the more senior, more mature population is quite phenomenal, really.
How much of a boost has Beijing's 2022 Winter Olympics been for the snow economy?
Well, even well before the Olympics happened, so going back to 2015 when the Olympics were announced, the economy of snow sports or winter sports was already on the rise. The Olympics solidified that. And ever since the day that Beijing won the Winter Olympics, the government has thrown its full support behind anything to do with winter sport, whether it's education relating to people getting involved as a career in winter sport or participation, or the media, culture, social well-being. The government has been 100% behind it. So the Winter Olympics really confirmed that the pathway for China being a dominant global force in winter sport was because of the Olympic Games. So no question it's been a phenomenal outcome.
Is it possible to put a number to the value of the snow economy? It's not just tourist destinations, but it's also the manufacturer's ski poles, for example.
Oh, no question. I mean, it's a massive, as I said, an ecosystem. So China is now one of the world's leaders in development of chairlifts and snowmaking machines, whereas 15, 20 years ago, it was all about importing from the international market. So the production and design, creation of retail clothing brands and ski equipment, ice skates, it's quite phenomenal, really, where China has come from to where it is now. 10 years ago, China used to watch what was going on in the rest of the world. Now the rest of the world is watching what China is doing because China is innovating, because it's the most maturely advancing market for introducing new product into the market, new consumers to the market. So China has definitely become an industry leader, and the rest of the world is watching.
You're watching CGTN, still ahead. We speak with a globally renowned Spanish winemaker pushing to make the industry more sustainable.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is family on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello there, welcome back. Now this year, Spain's Torres Wines was voted the world's most admired wine brand for the 7th time. Familia Torres enjoys global success, and it was one of the first Spanish wines to find a customer base in China. That was due to the drive of owner Miguel Torres, who has also pushed the industry to embrace for more sustainable winemaking. Our correspondent Ken Brown reports.
Torres family wines are iconic. A Spanish success story, 150 years and 5 generations in the making. Much of their modern success is attributed to Don Miguel Torres, a vineyard visionary whose passion for the industry hasn't been watered down with time.
Wine is history, wine is tradition. Can you imagine a food without, a lunch without wine? It would be terrible, no? It's part of our culture.
Torres vineyards like this one in Penedès, an hour from Barcelona, help the company produce over 30 million bottles of wine per year. But its success in China came from much more than just exporting wine. Winning one of the first import licenses granted to a foreign company in 1999, Torres helped open up the Chinese market to many other Spanish and French brands. Now he's treated like a celebrity in China.
When I was going to China, they had, posters, meet the living legend. I was not feeling very comfortable, but what do you want, no?
Looking to the future of the family business, one of Torres' great passions is sustainability. He was named by Time magazine as one of the world's top 100 most influential people leading climate change action.
I wish we could stop oil, you know. Imagine 100 million per day, barrels per day. There is no planet that can stand with it.
Familia Torres is taking action itself.
Then we bought land already close to the Pyrenees in cooler climates. Second, we decided also to mitigate our emissions. That's why you see so many photovoltaic panels. We produce in this winery, 50% of the electricity is produced by us with our panels. And finally, you know, we created a group called International Wineries for Climate Action. That was 5 years ago, and today we are 150 wineries around the world.
This sustainable movement gives him hope for the future, one where great wine and a stable climate can both age peacefully. Ken Brown, CGTN, Barcelona.
Well, from wine to food, and throughout the year, CGTN has been meeting people who've helped to build bridges between China and France as the two nations mark 60 years of diplomatic ties.
Yeah, one of them is French chef Corentin Delcroix, a TikTok influencer who's lived in Shanghai for more than a decade. Let's revisit his story.
Food is a great way to create bridges, because when people are interested in the other country's food, then they slowly, step by step, through food, they're going to learn more about the geography, about the people there, about the culture, about the language. 大家好，我是光坛。大家好，我是光坛。大家好，我是光坛。My name is Corentin Delcroix. My Chinese name is Guang Tan. I'm a French chef, been living in China for 17 years now. And I'm doing mainly two things. One is doing food R&D, so creating new products for different brands. And the other one is sharing some content on Chinese social media. I was born in the north of France, a family of 6 overall. So when I first came to China was in 2002 and was to study business. So I did a university in France, a business school, which is like 2 years in France and 3 years abroad. I chose to go to China. Since I didn't know much about China, food was also a good way to understand a bit more about the different regions, different styles of cuisine in China. So loved Chinese food at that time, and then I started to study a bit Chinese food, to learn a bit of Chinese cooking with the lady that was doing the cleaning in the dormitory. I asked her if she could teach me a few dishes. So we went to the market together, bought some ingredients, went back and started with some very, very basic Chinese dishes. She taught me how to cook them, and that's kind of what started my passion for food. And so I chose to change path and then to go back to France to properly study cooking in a cooking school back in France. And then in 2010 there was the Shanghai Expo, so I left France, left the work I had in France, and went to work in the restaurant in 2010 during the Shanghai Expo. After that I opened a consulting company. So now we're doing product development. So the online we started a bit more than 3 years ago, because working in consulting, as I said, like we get the consumer brief, our client's brief, then maybe we're going to come up with 50 different ideas. But in the end, like the product that are going to be launched, maybe there's just 1, 2. Our thought was, okay, it's too bad to waste those 48 ideas that we thought were some good ideas. So why not start to share those ideas on social media? 主要的元素组成的。那第一个当然最重要就是 When I started to share some Chinese, like me cooking Chinese, I was a bit afraid that everybody was, okay, that's not authentic, foreigner, they can't cook Chinese. I was a bit afraid there would be that kind of feedback, but in the end it's quite the opposite. Everybody's very encouraging and the comments are very positive. So when I do something they think is well done, then it's a lot of encouragement. Okay, you're doing great. When I do something maybe wrong in the recipe, a lot of people are going to give me some advice, like saying, okay, you should have done like that. It's better to use that product instead of that one. And so it's I learn a lot from the comment also. For a lot of French people, when you cook some authentic Chinese food, it's kind of a discovery for them. And I think a lot of them, at least in my family and in my friends, a lot of them are very eager to learn some Chinese, whether it is making dumplings or doing some chao tu dou si, shredded potato or anything. They are very eager to learn more about those dishes. Chinese food has huge potential in going global, and especially ingredients and some techniques, because there's a lot of things in the West, a lot of new ingredients that we don't have in the West, we don't even know about, most of the people don't know about. And Western chefs, they're always, especially in the fine dining area, always eager to discover some new ingredients, to be able to work with some new techniques, new flavors. A lot of ingredients that we take for granted nowadays, but no matter in Chinese cooking or in French cooking, like half of the ingredients we use are not native from our country. So it's all coming from abroad, so all this ingredient exchange is something that's always been taking place since human beings have been traveling around. So in France we're using star anise, we're using eggplant, all those came from China. If in China you're using chili, it came from South America. So all those exchanges are always constantly taking place. And I think now, a lot of Chinese ingredients are making their way in the fine dining world. So for example, the Sichuan pepper is one example. It's becoming trendy because of its refreshing and numb taste. It's something very new for the Western palate. But I think it's interesting to see that French people are using it in a very different way. Some desserts, like using it with chocolate, or those kind of pairing, which are not some traditional pairings. I think it's interesting to see how a different country will use the same product in a very different way. I think it's very exciting. I think for me the only way to improve is just to share a lot of things, create a lot of exchange, sharing what I learned with some Chinese friends, with some Chinese chefs, what I learned in Chinese cuisine, going to share it in Europe or in the West. I think that can create that bridge and that bond between the different countries. And I think food is a great way to create those bridges, because when people are interested in the other country's food, then they slowly, step by step, through food, they're going to learn more about the geography, about the people there, about the culture, about the language, all those kind of things. And I think that's a first step, like a first brick to start to build a house and where everybody can exchange and can understand more about each other.
Now, here in a rather festive and sparkly London, shoppers have been attending the city's historic meat auction market. They're hoping to bag a bargain ahead of Christmas Day. The Smithfield Market Auction traces its origins back to the 14th century as sellers look to clear their stocks for the holidays.
Yeah, many buyers waved cash and placards, some even dressed in festive costume, all in the bid to seal the deal. There you go, Sally. We missed out, didn't we? We could have been chasing turkeys.
Absolutely. And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks so much for watching.
Yeah, coming up next on CGTN, Africa Live. See you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, goodbye.